John.
I want to, first of all, thank you for the kind invitation to be able to speak to you this morning about some of the opportunities and challenges of supporting vulnerable children into education and its impact on sustainable development. Before I begin, I'd like to just say a few words about how I'm going to. There we go. Sorry about that. Just explain how the talk's going to be. Brief introduction to Global Care, who we are. The bulk of it is going to be looking at four different countries, how this works out in practice. So you've got all these goals and targets that the UN put together very carefully, and a lot of diligent work went into it. But how does it actually work in practice? What does it look like on the coalface, as it were? And then I just want to finish quickly on one of our funding models, which allows people to have confidence in the way the funding is used. So Global Care, who are we? We are an international Christian charity providing relief, development and education for vulnerable children around the world. We're working in about 15 different countries at the moment. We're over 40 years old, as we said, and we have a direct commitment to vulnerable children. Well, what do you mean by vulnerable children is often one of the things that people ask about. So within a very poor community and a disadvantaged community, there are some children that have characteristics that mean they are more vulnerable than others. So if we began to look at that, we'd look at a child who has no suitable adult to look after them is more vulnerable than a child living in a stable home environment. Issues of gender throughout the world that we work in, it's obviously the girl child who is disadvantaged and will be more vulnerable than a boy child. Environmental impacts. If you live near a river that floods a lot, you are going to be impacted a lot more by the environmental changes that we're seeing in the world now as our climate changes. Disability. Children living with long-term disabilities are more vulnerable than children who are able-bodied. Ethnicity. If you are a minority in a difficult community which is vociferous of a minority who are against you, you will experience disadvantage. And the same thing with chronic illness. If you have HIV, AIDS or Hep C, you are going to experience disadvantage and vulnerability. Children who've experienced trauma, particularly if you're looking at things involved in children involved in war zones, things like that, that often means that later on in life they experience vulnerability. We are trying to work with those sorts of children. They're in poor, disadvantaged communities, but they have extra vulnerability. And that's where we focus our work. We very much believe in education. It is the single most powerful tool that we have to break that generational cycle of poverty that we have seen so many communities fall into. And we're absolutely committed to enabling children to have access to education so that they can have a future that is different to the generations behind them. So we have a very strong commitment to it. All our projects have education at their core. Who do we work with? We do not send out people to work in the countries we work in. We find overseas partners, grassroots community partners who are trying to do something in their communities. They have this passion. We come across these people absolutely passionate about what's happening to their vulnerable children in their communities. They want to change the outcomes. They're tired of it. It shouldn't go on. What can we do? So we often find these groups, they form together and try and create some sort of structure. And our idea is to come in and help them build that capacity. Get them registered with the government, get their constitution in order, get the policies and processes in place, get them a bank account, teach them how to handle funds so that they can receive funds and they can report effectively and they know how they're using their money. And enabling them then to achieve what they want to do. Now, it's not easy because I recognize there's a power imbalance from us to them, especially when we first meet them, because apparently I'm a genius. Any idea I have is absolutely brilliant and we should implement it immediately. And that's the danger. So we're trying to do proper relationships where we're listening to them. They're talking about their passion, what they want to do, what they'd like to try. And we're trying to look at how we can resource that. And that relationship takes some time to get going, obviously, but our commitment is to making that relationship a correct partnership that can actually change the outcomes for children. I want to start in Zambia. So we work in the northwestern province. Lusaka is the capital, and I think you can see on there where that blue circle is Kabompo. Now, Kabompo is considered one of the 3 poorest districts in the whole of Zambia. There is some dispute about which one, and it depends which year you look in, where it is in that grade. Sometimes it's the worst, sometimes it's the 3rd worst. So we were really interested. We did some research in Zambia, and we found this group of people here. There was an NGO formed. USAID had gone up there a few years before, had done some really good work in forming 12 local NGOs. They helped them form. The only one left over was this one, New Life Action Foundation Trust. They got a nice long, they gave them a name that would work both in the UK and America, Foundation Trust, as you can imagine, very clever of the USAID when they started it. And we found them there. They had done very little because they didn't have much resources and they hadn't really developed beyond, but they had a passion for children. They were trying to do something within the community. So I wanted, when we first met them in 2016, this was the school they were trying to build. So it's M8 Primary School. It's named about the big road that goes right straight the way through Kabompo. It's not a very imaginative name, but it's named after a road. And they were trying to do something, had 40 children, the local community, they got them together. They were all paying a little bit of money in. They managed to build this basic structure. They paid the fees of all the teachers themselves. They were trying to do something. And when we met them, we began the discussion, helped them to have begin a discussion with the local education authority to say, well, what could be done? Now, the local education authority said, well, this is not good enough. It's obviously not a proper building. If you could get the land properly registered, and you could get a building on it, we'll pay for the teachers. Now, I've heard those promises before a lot of times, actually. So I was obviously convinced immediately. So what we did, we started looking at this with them, and in 2018, the local chief gave a piece of land, which was defined, and on that land, we helped fund the building of this school building, this first classroom block, the only one at the moment. 4 classrooms, and we are now, in 2025, there's 713 children. So obviously, they did understand there was a need. You know, they were right. There was a desperate need for a school in that area. The problem is 713 does not go into 4 very easily, as you can imagine. The numbers are difficult. So we started with that, and the government were as good as they said it. 11 teachers funded by the government are now there. So it makes a big difference. Got the opportunities. The community don't have to be paying for the salaries. But to make this work, you can't just build a school building and say, that's it's great, it's going to work. I think you all know that latrines or toilets are probably very important in any structure. And so we were involved in funding the building of the latrines, boys, girls. We built 2 girls, one for the younger, one for the older, 1 boys and the teachers. And I hope you can see in the middle, we've also built an accessible latrine as well. Has a basic ramp to it, a turning circle, which you can do, plus the inside has got bars for. So now that we wanted to make sure that the school, because it's built on 1 level, is open to all, is accessible, especially those with mobility challenges. You can do all that, but then on top of that, you need to have an opportunity for children to wash their hands after they've been to the toilet. And this became a big issue because the government had, in the end, said, well, we'll run a tap in, and they had a little tap right at the edge of the school land. And they said, there, we're providing you with water. Well, of course, the water doesn't come all the time anyway. So first of all, we managed to fund a wheelbarrow with some plastic things in it. They filled it up whenever it was going, but then it ran out and children weren't. So in the end, we had to fund a water tower. It took us a couple of years to plan it with them, to work with the local authority to get the right ones. It was safe because they've had a lot of problems with people building them and then them falling down in a school, which is very dangerous because people like to do it cheaper than the quote and with not as much metal in it, and that can cause problems. So we managed to build it, get it in. Now, the interesting thing is I do know, I've worked a long time in development, and I do know what the difference of clean water makes to a community and to health of children. But I was quite shocked at the impact it was. So before we put the building tower up, 30 children a week on average would have to go to the clinic or to the local hospital for treatment for intestinal infections. 30 a week. And that was when we were about 600, not 700. We are now averaging 1 child a week who's off for having to, no, it's not just, they have sometimes upset stomach. I'm talking about needing to go and get medical treatment for it and having to have interventions and put drips in and things like that. So massive difference to the health. So we're very excited by that. So we've got the buildings, we've got the teachers, we've got the latrines, we've got the water, and we've got a free education. The problem is some of the children are just too poor. The families cannot even afford for them to have what we call scholastic materials. That's pens, papers, pens, sharpeners, erasers, copybooks to you and me. And so you have to have some means of intervening in that way as well. So we're going down to really granular routes to make sure that all the children have access to this free education. And you have to provide a uniform, because uniforms are really important in being part of the school, feeling part of it, and also at the same time provide some sort of safeguarding extras that are provided in the community because you have a uniform. And also lighting. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the lighting a bit later, save time. So you've got all of that happening, and looking at how you do that. Then you come to children with special educational needs and disabilities, and you're thinking, well, this, you've gone all the way down here, now we're here. And in Kabompo, there is one classroom, 42 pupils for children with special educational needs or disability, living with disability. And you can see when you say, well, there's 15,000 people there, that's not really hitting where it needs to hit, is it? So we're starting some more research on that. We've dealt with some of those issues over time as we've built the team there. And now we're going to carry out a big research project with the local education authority to find out where all the children are who are not attending school, why they're not attending school, and what provision can be made. So that's our next step. I just want to share that one of the ways we deal with the very poor children, those children who can't make that transition because they don't have the scholastic materials, they don't have the support from home, is we have a sponsorship scheme that we run, 31 children, and the team have trained up volunteer caregivers, they call them, and they visit the children's home twice a month just to make sure the child is going to school, everything's okay, that they have the support they need. They record everything they do in their home visit books. There's a coordinator who is a funded member of staff who then is able to action any needs that these children need. And very interestingly, which is the thing that I found fascinating, is they don't allow one caregiver to visit the house all the time. Because my idea would be the idea of building up a relationship with that family. So this person becomes your link. And they said the problem with caregivers, they're volunteers, so they sometimes move on. So you need to, if you have a group of people visiting them, one moves on, you can add another one in and you've still got that relationship you're building. Just that, so you need to go down to that granular level to make sure that children can access the education that's been made available. I just want to talk about Janet very briefly as an example. 13-year-old girl, she's in grade P6, which would be year 5, I think, in our system, because next year she will be going, she'll finish her primary education. She lives about 15 minutes walk from the school. She lives with her mother, 4 brothers, and a baby sister. She's number 5, so she has 4 older brothers, baby sister. Two of the brothers are at secondary school, 16-year-olds, so they're twins. And then she has 2 older brothers who have left school. Her mother and her 2 eldest brothers and the baby tend to a farming plot that they have about 40 kilometers away from where they live. So they go out a long way away. And Janet is left there with her 2 brothers, the twins, who are at secondary school. And while she's away, while the mother's away, Janet is basically, it's a child-headed household. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but she basically runs the home. She does the washing, the cleaning, everything for everybody. Now, I was interested in this because then I see the boy holding the tree like that. That's one of the twins. So I suggested to him that maybe it would be good if it was shared responsibility, not always done by Janet, but that was not going to ever happen and was not at all. There was no interest in it at all. So you've got this problem with this gender bias, which is affecting her. So I talked to her and said, what difference has it made since you've had the support from New Life Action Foundation as a sponsored child? She has 3 meals a day instead of 2. She's more healthy than she was before. Her attendance at school is very good. In the past, her mother would take her with her to the 40 kilometers away, so she would only attend school whenever she was in the area. Well, that wasn't going anywhere, was it? So now, as being part, the mother has to guarantee that the child will always attend school. Fantastic. She loves school. She thinks it's a great win for her. She has warm clothing as she can, and that she can wear. But one of the interesting things, I want to go on lighting here, is we gave solar lamps out. Would you believe solar lights have a gender bias? Because what does Janet do when she comes home before it gets dark? She brushes the compound, she does the washing, she does the washing up, she does all that. And then what happens by the end of the time everybody's finished? It's dark. Her brothers can sit there studying away, very happy in the sunlight. She can't. So what happens is the solar has made a disproportionate impact to the girls on our scheme compared to the boys, which has been fascinating to me. So the local education authority wanted to confine it. What had the school done to the girls? Why was suddenly the girls improving their academic performance? And we've had this happen in a number of different countries as we provided this. So solar lamps are gender biased in these parts of the world. Fantastic. I'm very excited by that, because one of the things we're really struggling with is getting girls to go finish primary well, to go into secondary and to move on. I want to talk to you about India GCare, the program we have there. It's in Kalyan is a smaller city outside, about 2.5 hours away from Mumbai, Maharashtra state, and Patrapol is a slum area just outside. And we run there. When we got involved with a group called GCare India, they weren't called GCare at the time, but they changed their name because they really wanted to associate with global care. But so they're called GCare India, their association with us. There were some issues. The children were not going to school in this slum area. The children were not going. Just down the road were 2 government schools, free education. You know, the government have done their bit. They're providing free education. Children weren't accessing it, and there were some barriers to their access to this. One of the key ones was discrimination at school. So the children would turn up from Dalit background. So they were made to sit at the back, and so they were sitting at the back. Teachers would not mark their homework because they didn't want to touch the page that they'd touch. They could not drink the water from the water fountains because they'd make it unclean. And there was supposed to be a rota for keeping the classrooms clean because they can't afford cleaners. But guess who did all the cleaning? It was the children, the Dalits. So everything was against them going to school because of the discrimination. Second thing was, when they came home, there was no support. The parents are illiterate. They're not enumerate. They have enough functional maths to have some basic idea of trading money and being able to do that, buy and sell things, but they couldn't really help with anything at home. And the third thing was, children are expected to get money for the family. We don't have enough money, we need our children. So what they looked at, the first thing they did was they decided they must go to the schools and talk to the 2 head teachers and the senior teachers and say, this is not good enough. You cannot treat people like this. You jolly well know the law. We know the law. You know the law. Let's change it. And fortunately, over time, there has been a change in philosophy and thinking in the schools. And they have. So being able to get children to go to the government schools. And they run the government schools morning and afternoon because they use the building twice because it's so expensive to have a building. No education at home. The idea was, we'll have homework clubs then. Let's create homework clubs. So if you go in the afternoon, you come in the morning to the centre for 2 hours and we help you with the homework ready. If you go in the morning, you come in the afternoon to us and we spend time. So now we have 221 children in 3 centres around Patrapol. They're small little areas where you can get the children and help them with their support and give them a little bit of food as well. So where these key inputs you need to put, as well as making sure they have the scholastic materials. They need to have pens and pencils and all that as well. So that can be provided. But it's using the formal education that is there and prepared by the government, but ensuring the children who did not have access can now have access and have the correct support to make the best use of that as well. Just want to give you an example of a boy. Sarthak, he originally, his family weren't sending him to school. He has 2 younger brothers, one who's too young to go to school at the moment, but his father worked very hard but didn't get paid very much, and he couldn't afford to send him to school. And so when recently GCare went to visit him, visit the family, and said, look, you need to send your children to school if you want to give them a future. He had tried once to get them into school, but had so much backlash from the school, he hadn't bothered. Discrimination was too much. He said, I can't be doing this. So actually the staff took the children, got them registered, gave them the scholastic materials and told them that they come into the homework clubs each day. And that's working really well. And the good thing is the family are very supportive of their sons attending, and the food helps a bit as well. So you don't have to there's a little bit of food in there, which helps the children. And he's doing well at school now. He's called catching up because they've got that extra support that allows them to have. So they're not the bottom of the class anymore. Because all the Dalits were the bottom of the class, they're not. They're now doing quite well academically. The school are interested. Because there's interest, they were beginning to get some. It's not always easy. We had a terrible case where one of our boys got knocked down by a car, was left in the road. No one would touch him. Cars going past, nobody would touch him. So one of our staff went and picked him up and took him to the hospital and got it done. And then some people really took against that. They thought that was terrible, and there was this, almost a near riot, and our staff got arrested for causing a riot, which is a stupid idea, isn't it, really? But that, you know, it's those sorts of problems that really was a very difficult situation. Fortunately, one of our board members is a member of the NGO police in India, and came down and said to the police, this is completely unacceptable what's going on. And the head of police had to come out and make a formal, in front of all the police, and the people in the police station had to formally apologise to the member of staff for what he'd done. So that there are some good outcomes if you keep fighting the law, if the law's on your side. If the law's not on your side, then it's a much harder thing. But so in that difficult situation, we're using the formal, we've still got the formal schools in place. We're choosing that extra support in a more non-formal setting like homework club, as well as linking with the families. So it's slightly different to Zambia, but it's making sure the children do access what's there. I want to jump now to a very different set of challenges, and this is some older children. This is looking at girls in northeastern Uganda and Soroti, where we've got a vocational training centre. COVID was, again, like most things, was gender biased. So if you go to many different of the countries that I've been visiting, I've been very, very surprised to find that in the top end of primary, there's less girls. Where are these girls gone? What's happened about this? Well, COVID, they didn't re-engage afterwards. And this same thing happened in Uganda. So about 2 years, in reality, whatever the government tell you in Uganda, they lost 2 years of education, in truth. And so re-engaging was not an option. And some of them, we originally started this in 2004 for just mothers of children. They got pregnant during, they were stuck in the homestead, didn't know what to do with themselves. Ended up being preyed upon and pregnant. And so we were providing for mothers. How can we help the baby? We need to help these young mothers to try and get into some way of forming income. So we are not going to be able to help them re-engage with formal education. We're not going back into that. We're going towards the skills. And if you look at the United Nations has a really good thing on vocational skills. It's really wedded to the idea that there are some children who cannot go through the education system. Therefore, we've got to give them the ability to look after themselves and to fund themselves. So we have, this year, we got 43 young women between the ages of 17 and 23. 18 of them are mothers. 2 of them have 2 children. So we got 14 doing a hairdressing course, 13 doing a baking course, we call it catering, I think, and 16 doing a tailoring courses. And the idea is give them skills in 12 months. So it's going to be a 12-month course. This runs throughout 2025. So that at the end of that, they can then make money themselves. They can go out and do. What it lends itself as well, because one of the things the United Nations is also encouraging us all to think about is how do we enable these young people to begin to understand the importance of engaging with civil society. What about their human rights? What are their rights under the law? Gender equality, things like that. And this sort of skills-based training really lends itself to those extra ideas of being able to present to them through the teachers who are more like mentors, as it were. It's not a teacher-pupil at that age. It's much more a mentoree. And we've seen some really good, really exciting things coming out of that recently with, and I want to give you one example of how it works in practice. So Irene, she's 22 years old. Her young child is 3 years old. She left school for year 8. She disengaged after year 8 and said, I can't go back. Her dad has not been very supportive. Her mum, fortunately, she comes, there's mum and her dad together, but mum has been supportive in trying to help her. She was feeling very hard done by for a couple of years, thinking, well, there's no chance of income. I've not got a future. Everything is just gone from me. Obviously, the boy, the father of the child, long gone. But one of her relatives heard about what we were trying to do and said, well, you need to go and talk to them. And she came end of 2024 to see us and talked and started in January 25 on this baking course. Now, it's not simply learning how to bake something, because that's relatively straightforward formula, isn't it? The idea of I like the baking course because it instantly takes them to making money and selling. How do you do this? So you bake something. What they bake during the day, they're supposed to sell on the way home. They don't take it home to eat. That's not the whole point of it. They're supposed to take it away and sell it on the road as you go. or back at near home. So getting the idea and then they have come back and report how they've done and what's been going on and what sells and what doesn't sell, beginning to understand what the market is where they live, what is selling, what isn't selling, what makes money, what doesn't make money, how expensive are these ingredients, how long did it take me to make it, and what was the profit I made at the end of it, getting them to think really carefully about that. She's really excited because she doesn't have to pay for any of the materials at the moment, so it's all profit, you know, so this is really a great idea. But they have to explain to her, no, the materials are going to cost you this much. So, and she's now got enough money to buy soap and the oil for the skin, as well as being able to fund clothing for herself and her child, which she thinks is really great. So, and she's going to be finishing at the end of this year, sometime in December. And she's saying, well, I'm going to start a small little business around my home. I'm going to use my home to bake stuff, and then I'm going to sell into the community like I've been doing. So we're very interested to see how that does. We found the baking does very quickly allow them some income. Tailoring, because it takes a long time to do, you do get money at the end. So what's been most fascinating to me, remember we've got the three things. We've got tailoring, we've got baking, and we've got beauty, salon and stuff. So what works really well for those three? Weddings. So you get cooperatives coming out of this group. So the last group that left, there was a couple of them tailoring, a couple from the beauty side of it, a couple from baking. They're going around saying, we can do a wedding for you at a really good price because we can make all the stuff for you. It's quite exciting. I think they're a bit overambitious starting there, but I love it. I just love their entrepreneurial spirit, and it's very exciting to see them from people who felt there was no future and feeling really down to seeing some really exciting changes. Now, I want to go, and I want to ask for your patience in this one, because I hope you'll see at the end what I'm talking about. We went to Ethiopia, an area in Koshi. We worked with a group, and I'll give you their full title. I'm going to call them Addis Kidan, and you'll know why. Ethiopian Addis Kidan Baptist Church Welfare and Development Association. I'll call them Addis Kidan. So they have got a real passion for rural poverty. When I first met them in Addis Ababa, they had 2 containers in a muddy field, and that was their office, because they were interested in just getting out there, John. We don't care about Addis Ababa. We want to get out there instead. And they had been looking at this community and seeing that no children were making the move to government schools. Now, the problem, because this is a rural area, the school is a few kilometers away. Now, they can be anything between 4 and 8 kilometers away. That's a long way for a little child to walk, isn't it? 4 kilometers school. That's 8 kilometers there and back. And so they weren't making the transition. They were holding the children back because they didn't want their little boy or girl walking that far on their own, because they didn't have time to do it, and that far back. So by the time they were about 8 or 9, when they thought they could walk, they were so far behind educationally, they just didn't bother. I'm not going to bother with it. So this group came to us and said, well, we've been looking at this and studying this, and what we want to try and do is create self-help groups for these women. So it's a savings and loan scheme, if you can imagine. And, oh, sorry. Maybe this was. Is that okay? Sorry. So we set up basically, in the end, we had 10 groups of women, 10 to 20 in each, and a total of 150 women in these various groups, 675 impacted in the family, within the family group. We did not fund any loans. All we funded was the facilitators and the trainers, those people who came alongside, who helped the groups form, got the constitution, got it registered with the government, because anything to do with money, and Ethiopia really do like to keep an eye on everybody. So the government want to know what's going on. The bank account they needed to be formally registered, they helped them with all of that. They did all the training around how you set it up, how you run a loan scheme. And they help them to elect their officers, the chair, vice chair, the secretary, the treasurer, all those people, and on these little groups. And then they encourage them to start saving. So basically, a very simple system. The women save a little bit of money each week, and then later on they can borrow from the fund. But everybody decides who borrows that week or how much they get. Okay, so you have to come with your idea, you discuss it all together, and make a decision. And so what's the sorts of things they have been doing? So some of them have just been trying to grow more on the little bit of land they have. So you'd start with something like buying some fertilizer. So your maize harvest will be much, much better, or your bean harvest, vegetables. They also do livestock, and you can see here we've got pullets. So you buy pullets, small chickens, feed them up and then sell them on. And then that gives them goats, sheep, all sorts of things like that as well. Small businesses like shops. You can see this lady has gone out into a farming area, bought lots and lots of tomatoes, brought it back to the little township and just selling tomatoes. The other one is recycling plastics, picking up rubbish off the street. But you have to have a place to store it. So you need to pay someone to store it for you, and you need to have the bags to put it in so that you can sell it to when the recycler comes through town. Hair salons, making jewelry, clothing, making baskets. Those are all the sorts of small, very small scale projects that they've been involved in. The big thing, interesting when you're talking to them now, is what held them back initially. They all had ideas, but didn't know how to do it. They all had ideas about what might make money. They never knew how to do it, and they never had any access to any capital to do it. So this very small way of getting them to share with each other, work together, support, share failure, share success, gives them the opportunity then that they needed to be able to go further on and actually develop the work that they're doing. Now, this has been quite a long way away from children's education. We're over here somewhere, aren't we? We're talking about women's empowerment here, talking about giving them the power to generate the income they need. So I kind of want to take two steps. The first step I want to do is look at a case study. Shateye, who is 30 years old. She lives with her husband and 7 children. And she has a small plot of land, which they try and use. They're not getting a lot of money out of it. Therefore, both of them are daily laborers. Daily labor. They just hang around. If someone needs someone on a building site, they'll go and do it. If somebody needs someone out in the fields, they'll do it. So it's quite a harsh and difficult life. She joined the self-help group because a neighbor said, "We need more members. Are you willing to join?" And she didn't have a clue what it was, but she said, "Right, that's a good idea. I'll join. If the neighbor's joining, I'll join with them." And she's been very excited by the difference it's made. She said before she had no ideas really about running small businesses. Her life was basically going to be working in the fields or working on the building sites as a daily laborer, and that was going to be it. And then so she taught this group, and she said getting all the training she needs, the ideas she needed to be able to form a small business, a micro business. So the first thing she ever did, she took a loan for £10 sterling, which is 2,000 birr. And she bought pullets, which she kept for a few months, and she sold them for 50 sterling. So we start with 10, ended up with 50. And with the first amount of money that she got, she had to pay off the 10, obviously. She used some of it to buy a sheep, because she'd like to have a go at a sheep and see how that went. And with the rest of the money, which is the thing that excites me, and this is where I'm coming to on education, she bought some educational materials for her children, so that they could start going to school. The older children go to school. So suddenly we've got this link developing, haven't we? The response of a woman, give a man money and they'll go out drinking, having a bit of living at large in that sort of culture for some reason. But the women, and you'll suddenly find them investing in children. And so that became the exciting thing for us. They never understood why at the beginning, when we did our needs assessment, they had to answer full questionnaires about how many children do you have, how old are they, how many are going to school, why aren't they going to school? And they said, well, why are you talking about that when it's all about loans? But in the end, they come back to where we were hoping we'd end up with, and they started investing in their children. So we got very excited by that, beginning to see their first signs of this. So talking to her, she gets very excited about the weekly meetings they have together. She said one of the good things is not only do we learn about loans, we all know about good parenting, personal hygiene, environmental sanitation, how to be involved in investing our savings as well. How do we carefully use it and make sure that we know what we're doing? And she said, one of the things she's noticed, her children are much more healthy. They did a lot about health and hygiene and how you balance diets, and it's really paying off. She said, oh, they're so much better. So we're quite excited about, we're seeing the health of the children improve, which is what we're down here, we're interested in children. We're not interested in mothers, please don't get me wrong, but that's our focus, isn't it? That's where we are. Now, this was a surprise to us. They decided that they were fed up with the children going to school late and being left behind. What are we going to do? 150 women get together and say, what are we going to do about our children's education? The fact that we cannot access the free government education because they're so far behind. They came up with the idea of a preschool. So they built this building. They built the building and they paid for the teacher there. So that's what they did. They came to us and said, look, we haven't been able to finish the building properly. Can you help us paint it? That's our paint, that blue paint we funded. And the latrines were not effective because they were basically, I think, really just going behind the hedge. You see the hedge? They went behind it. So we built some latrines on site, some very basic Ethiopian local material ones. We didn't use cement or anything. These buildings are wattle and daub, you know, they've got pieces of wood like that and you just put the mud on it. By painting it, and with cow dung as well, so you make it, and by painting it, you seal it in, so you can get a lot more years out of it. Now, we don't fund anything. We funded that one intervention. All of the children now going to preschool is funded by the women themselves. And, not surprisingly, what are the children doing? They're making good transitions into free government education. And the women have the money to spend on the scholastic materials that the children need to make that transition effective. So we started over here with women's groups and savings and all that. We ended up where we wanted to end up, with the children now going into school, having the opportunity to learn. I hope you've seen that I've tried to explain there are quite a few others I could talk about, but Zambia, we had this formal school, we needed it, it was needed in the community, it needed buildings, it needed latrines, it needed that, so the government would come in and help, and it needs to have the support for the very poorest children. In India, we had the government schools already there, they were functioning, they were good, but the children could not get into it. So we had to have that intervention, that advocacy to allow them into it, the homework club, and the family support. In Uganda, the girls who disengaged from education, we had to find new skills of vocational to give them that future. In Ethiopia, we wanted a community-wide intervention. So we started with the self-help for the women, which then directly led. There are lots of different ways of getting to that education, which is what we all want for children, that opportunity to have good access to good education and the opportunity to learn. And I hope that I've rushed through it. I apologize, I had to try to cram a lot in. I hope I haven't tried to cram too much in, but I hope you see the diversity of response. When you work with local communities, they are going to choose the response they think is best. When you work with these local groups of people, they are the ones who come up with the ideas. Just want to finish very quickly. I've got 3 more minutes. I'm going to rush through this. How we're funded. So how do you get the money to do all this? We have regular givers, so people might be sponsoring a child or giving a regular amount of money. We have trusts and grant-making bodies, which are really important. We find trusts who are really interested in our work, trying to develop relationships with them and encourage them to give and join us on this journey. One-off giving, we run appeals, things like that, like lots of charities do. And we have 2 charity shops that we run in Coventry, that we use the funding from that to be able to fund our work. Just want to finish with sponsorship. Sponsorship has not had a great press sometimes, but I'm convinced it's a really helpful way of people. I get asked, the biggest thing I get asked is, how do I know the money that I'm going to give you actually goes and makes a difference? Well, the sponsorship answers that question straight away. It's an easy answer. You can actually see that you have direct accountability because you see the difference it makes. You can actually watch a child demonstrating the change that we've been seeking to make in that child's life, as they access good education, as they have opportunities to change. And I think it helps people as they've watched children who can better understand some of the difficulties and challenges that vulnerable children face within already poor and disadvantaged communities. You can see the extra needs they have, the extra challenges that are put in front of them. And I think one of the things it also encourages donor patience and longevity. I like longevity in donors. I like to have good relationships with them. People can understand what you're doing, join you on the journey. It's great. We've got a website. If you want any more information, there's lots there. And I'm here afterwards as well, if you'd like to talk. I am 38 minutes, 47 seconds. I am under 40 minutes. Yay! It's probably the first time I've ever done it. Thank you.
Once they ask the questions, you wouldn't mind repeating it. So
okay. Yes.
Many thanks, John, and celebration talk. You put the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, in the slide. In what ways does the United Nations at a granular level help nations? What for in terms of the infrastructure? What type of relationships with government do you see in the case of
one of the most powerful things the United Nations, this was a question about how does the United Nations actually impact on the ground themselves, besides, the important thing about United Nations and these development goals is that they set a standard. Everybody signs up to it. So when you're talking to a local official, you're saying, but your government has signed up to this. This is not, I'm not pushing this on you. This is government. You decided as a nation, this is what you wanted to do. Really powerful. The Charter of the Child is one of the best documents that's ever been produced, I think, by the United Nations. Use it all the time in terms of safeguarding, protecting children, protecting girls, equal opportunities, children with disabilities, all that sort of thing. And all the governments, I think, except Saudi Arabia, have signed up to it. So any country we work in, we say, well, you, and in the same case here. So when we're dealing with local authorities, we're saying, it's quality education we're talking. What are the facilities you're providing? What, you are supposed to be providing the teachers. You are committed yourself to free education. So a lot of countries, they can't provide the free education, but at least they're trying to get there. And that's the tool. They give us the tool. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, especially number 4 with education, we can fight with it. We can use it as a weapon, not a weapon, but as a, so you signed up to it. We're helping you to implement it. So why aren't you behind us?
Thank you very much again. I'll just move a couple of points. I wasn't quite certain how you actually find the communities that you work with. And the second point, it being a big focus on women, which is obviously extremely important to the benefits of that. But I wondered if you had any backlash at all from the communities in which you work, for example, from men in Africa or from the non-Arab community in England.
It's talking about, we have a kind of gender bias in a lot of our work, and do we have a big reaction from men in the community or against some of the work, especially when we're working with Dalits or in situations. The answer is yes, we do have a big, I'll deal with the second one first. We do, it's been very difficult in India, it's getting much worse because the government, the BJP government is pushing that line that you shouldn't really be working with them. And it's a struggle. The law is still there. The constitution is still there. They have not changed that. I think they're wanting to try and change the constitution in some way to take away the rights of Dalits, but I don't think they'll be successful because of the number of votes that can be brought to bear on it. And I pray they don't, because that's a disaster for us. But it is difficult. You do get a lot of backlash, like I was saying about getting attacked in the street and stuff like that for our staff. It's quite, and so you do get that. In terms of, we had a big backlash in Ethiopia from the men. It's a Muslim community they're working in. They really thought this was a really poor community. They're disadvantaged. And I think partly it was because they're a Muslim community that the government wasn't really interested in helping them. So that's why this group wanted to help them. And the men were saying, no, this is not the right thing. Now the men are saying, can you help us form our own groups? So now we're going to have men's and women's groups. It's lovely. So it's changed. It has changed over because they've seen the change for their children. Actually, I give men a bad press, really. A lot of fathers really love their children and want the best for them. It's not a surprise. And so you do something, but you do at the beginning often have this thing of why are you investing in a girl? What's the point? You should invest in boys. We have a big problem with disability, particularly as well. So, in Uganda, we invested in a boy who was severely disabled, a very clever boy. He did really, really well. And he's doing excellent in the schools. And then he died unexpectedly. And they said, we told you so. It was a waste of money. But that's not who we are. And that's not God. God isn't like that at all, is he? He's about justice and it's about truth. They don't care about that. And interesting enough, at his funeral, a lot of people said he was the one who changed my view on children with disability. We need to invest in them in the community. And so we're about changing. We're trying to change, as you say, trying to change people's opinions, views on the way the world is. It can't go on like that. Do you know what I mean? It's unsustainable for them as well. They're going to lose all the opportunities of having their children educated, regardless of their background.
I'm aware that a lot of organisations doing similar things aren't necessarily interested. Do you share your expertise? Do you share your programs? Is it all very, this is ours?
No, we do share a lot with others and trying to get, so I'll give you an example. Water is really important to communities, but we're not water experts. So in Uganda, in Soroti, where we have a big work, I got really concerned that potable water was not available for children. We're having a lot of problems with absenteeism at school. We just don't have the money to build wells. I met a group in Ethiopia who were called Water for All. They're based in the States, but they have a real passion for rural communities without water. And they have very simple rigs where the community drill their own well. Fascinating. So I went to them and said, look, if I could get some money, would you come and train a team in Soroti? So they said yes, and they came, and this was back in 2008, 2009. We've drilled over 1,000 wells now. The community have drilled. So it's actually trying to link with people all the time. So when I'm talking about that research we're trying to do in the area in Zambia, the problem was the Catholic charity that supported that school for children with disability has gone, has said we're withdrawing the funding, which leaves them open to all sorts of difficulties. So that's why we've got involved. We would not have got involved because we work alongside them, because they were doing a good, really great work with children with disabilities. Their funding has gone, and therefore we wanted to say, we were requested by the local education authority and by the local community, come and have a look with New Life Action Foundation, what can you do? So we're always trying to link with other people and find out what's working, what's not working, what do they think, and what can they do? And often we're trying to make sure that so Addis Kidan, that group that we work with in Ethiopia, when we first started, we were one of the only funders from overseas. Now they get loads of funding from lots of people. And they once said to me, John, you're so small in what the grant you give us now, we're not sure it's worth working with you, which was great news for us because we're small charities. Why work with it? But they like the fact that we'll fund some of their wackier stuff, you know, the stuff that's outside, the stuff that other people won't fund. They quite like that. You know, it's small for them, but it's really critical for their going away. So we're always trying to find people who will come in and support the work that we've been funding so that we can move on to somewhere else, at the same time as making sure that we're aware of what other people are doing. It is really important, you're right. You know, you find people working in the same place doing the same thing and you're thinking, well, you know, that's not really helpful, is it, to the community?
Two questions. One is, you started your body level, you studied the area, and then you jumped into development. How did you get the confidence to move to that and be successful? The second question is, you've got so much knowledge and experience. Are you taking this around the world to the NGOs? Because it would spur a lot of activity around it. Knowledge and experience.
Thank you. Two questions. One, how did I end up in development work? What was my journey? Seems a bit strange. And secondly, how do we share what we're doing with a wider audience, as it were, with other people? So the first thing is, when I was growing up in Lebanon, I always found it very difficult to see the poverty and the rich side by side. And during the time I was in Lebanon, the Civil War, 75 onwards, lived through the Civil War years, many of those years, with all the difficulties that provided for all the communities involved and the suffering that came with it. And I was very upset. I was in Lebanon in '82 as well, when the invasion came from the south. So all sorts of things I've been through. And in all of those, I remember one time in my teenage years seeing a Palestinian woman shouting at an Israeli soldier, and her father was hitting her with a big stick to get her away from the Israeli soldier so the Israeli soldier wouldn't kill her. And her husband had been killed by the Israelis just then, and she was very angry. And I remember at that time feeling utter frustration and anger at the way the world was. It just wasn't right. It just felt to me that it was upside down. It was completely wrong that this should be happening in the world. And how can this massive injustice happen? So I really wanted to get, so when I went into engineering, I thought, well, I wanted to be a pilot, really. That's why I did aeronautical engineering. I wanted to be a pilot. I actually went for an interview with BA, but got kicked out straight away. So well, that's not for me. So I went into engineering. And then originally I was going to go back to Beirut to lecture at the American University of Beirut in engineering. I'd been offered a job. But just as I was going back, it was about a year and a half after they were taking hostages. You remember when they took all those people from AUB, they took Terry Waite and co. And so I did not want to be in that part of Beirut, and they closed. I was going to be lecturing in what was the nominal Christian area. They closed that center and said, now you have to go to the other area. I didn't really want to go in that area. So I started teaching IT. So I started, and while I was at the school, I got involved with funding. There was a World Vision project there. I got involved with that. There was another Tier Fund project. I don't know if you know Tier Fund. I got involved with them, helping them, and World Vision helping run a sponsorship scheme. So while I was teaching, I was doing all these different things. And when I came back, I thought, oh, this is really interesting work. I'd really like to be involved in it. And that's how I really ended up in there. So that was the first question. The second question, how do we disseminate? Well, one of the things that I'm part of different networks. We're part of Bond, which is the big one, and but I'm also part of smaller networks. We're meeting with other CEOs of NGOs where we wanting to share what really I'm really interested in, what works and what doesn't. Do you know what I mean? So what's really working in your development area, and then we all share that and disseminate that around, and that's very, very helpful because people say, well, in this country they tried this and it really, really worked. Is that something we could be looking at? Again, the danger is I come and say, well, I know an organization who tried this. Do you want to try it? Yeah, John, genius. Let's do it. You know, if you'll fund it, I'll do it. I'll do whatever you want. So you have to be a bit careful about sharing the ideas that way. I'm always trying to say to them, have you heard of this organization in Zambia doing this? What do you mean? Well, they work in that area. Why didn't you go and have a look and see what they're doing? You know, encourage them to come back with the idea, not me. Tell them. But so disseminating the ideas around, there's quite a lot of that goes on actually, and it's helpful.
As well as disseminating ideas, is there any dissemination of research evidence of what works and is the UN actually helpful providing some of that?
UN is very, so does the UN help with bringing all the ideas together and getting the research in a place where people can access it? And yes, the answer is yes. The UN are extremely helpful in looking at quite a big level. If you want to look at a big level and seeing what's happening, what's really working within that culture or that culture, they're very good at it. So we use their materials quite a lot for evidence-based when we're trying to raise funding. So we say, well, the UN say this is a really clever idea, and so we've got support, triangulation support from others. Not just us saying it, but there's another body saying that this is something that is worth investing in. So I think the UN the UN is underestimated, I think, in the impact it has. A lot of people say, so we've got COP going on at the moment, have we? Or COP 47, whatever it is, and people are saying, oh, well, it's not. But if it wasn't for the UN, it just wouldn't have started. We wouldn't have got to where we got today. We wouldn't have the Charter of the Child. We wouldn't have these opportunities. I think that the UN, I know it's struggling with funding and things like that, but it's significant. It's important. It gives us that bedrock on which to base our work and explaining to people. We don't have to go back to that. We can refer to them and they're people respect the United Nations and say, well, if they're saying it, then we'll take their word for it.
Sponsorship. What sort of cost of sponsoring a child, and what sort of reports do you get?
Yeah, so it's £25 a month, every month, and the sponsor will get 2 letters every year from the child. And when I mean letters, they're loosely letters. Of course, if it's a small child, they'll draw you a picture of a tree or something like that. But at least you're going to see the academic progress, which is what it's all about. So their ability to do various things and change. And then you get one photo a year, and you also get a report on that child's progression at school and in the home as well. Because there's the issues around, like I was trying to really stress, it's often the home life that can restrict access to school, or the enjoyment of school, or the opportunities. It's almost if you're going to school despite your parents, because your parents don't want you to go, then it's much harder than if we can get the parents to, by constantly talking to them, the value of it, the importance of it, the opportunities that it brings, then it does change it. But it is, so you can see the change. That's what we really wanted people to understand. And it's like, you know, there are some children who don't make it, but I think they're just as valid to be involved and to understand what stopped them as well.
We started 4 children.
Yeah.
And once a year we have Zoom calls.
Yeah.
They're standing there, we
Yeah.
do that and see who is sponsored.
We haven't done that. We haven't done that. No.
Thank you. Can I just ask, you've obviously, from the picture, they've obviously been.
Yeah.
How fit for purpose do you find the curriculums?
So how useful are the syllabuses? What the children learning to? So a lot of countries have worked very hard on their primary syllabus, and so literacy and numeracy they're doing quite well in, I would say, like as a general experience. There are issues in secondary school when you come to political issues about the history, the geography, and a lot of countries struggle with that. So in Syria, where we work in Damascus, you can imagine what history is like. You cannot teach history it's better to teach history of the United States or something like that. It's a bit safer. If you teach history of the country they're in, then you're into all sorts of political problems. But I think my general feeling of traveling around to school is that the primary educations in most countries is extremely well thought out and carefully put together. You know, a lot of countries are trying to encourage the use of English, but they recognize that has to be held back. You should be teaching in the vernacular for the first 4 or 5 years, and then you can add in the English once they've learned the grammar and everything of their own language, which is much easier to learn. You've given them tools so they can learn English. Because by secondary school, a lot of countries are teaching maths and science in English.
Curriculum question, is there that generally in the health education within the school community that will help by thinking about reducing infection?
It's talking about how you do PHSE, is it within settings. Some schools they do quite a lot, and COVID helped in a sense, looking at health and hygiene. There is a real gap when it comes to teenage girls. There's an issue around that, the whole that's teenage pregnancies and the change for girls, and that causes a big problem. It's not done well in many countries. So we have, we've started doing things like we have a Saturday girls club in a lot of the primary schools, the top school classes of primary school in Rukunjiri, which is part of Uganda. We've been trying that out to see how that will work. So a couple of teachers, women teachers, with the girls, spending time talking about relationships, talking about all the various things that they might be going through. And that has been quite successful in terms of dealing with that. But it's not done very well in the curriculum.
Very much two questions here. One is, do you work in informal settlements? And also, do you classrooms where do you have any sort of policy change recommendations? Could you do
That's interesting. So the first question, informal settlements. Yes, sorry, I'm trying to think about it. We are involved in working in informal settlements where we have to. They're difficult because they're transient. So you get people going in and out. It's really hard to build that community. I personally, and that's the problem with, I like rural settlements because you've got this idea of continuity. You've got family units. It's really hard to keep children safe in Kibera in Kenya. We've got a project there. It's really difficult because you've got the transient community. It's really, really hard to develop the long-term link. Parents are taking children back to the village and then coming back, and it's hard to build up that. So we do work in transient communities, but it is much harder, I think, to have community change, to actually really change people's opinions. You're dealing on a family by family basis almost. And the second one, sorry. Policy change. One of the things that I've always been convinced of is that small is beautiful in development, and actually bubbling up is much more powerful than bringing in solutions from above. Very hard to do, and I do understand there's a big discussion, and I do accept the idea that funding on scale can bring bigger changes, and it's more efficient and effective. People say, I'm not sure about the effective. I can agree with the efficiency of it, but people say you waste a lot of money because you're working with small groups of people. They don't have the skills, so you're trying to teach them skills that I could bring 5 people in from Lusaka, set up a nice NGO, and jobs are good. Do you know what I mean? But it doesn't have the effectiveness. It doesn't stay. Those people, as soon as I stop the funding, will leave. If I stop the funding tomorrow in Zambia, they'll still be there, the people. All the skills we've left are in the community. All the change we've brought is still there. So I think policy has been moving towards what is the cheapest way of doing it, efficiency, and we sometimes squeeze effectiveness out of it, because I want my money to make this change, and the impact measurement I'm going to do is in 3 years' time. So all I care about is that, if all I care about is that impact measurement after 3 years, then I can deliver it, but I'm personally not as interested in the impact of 3 years. I'm looking at generational change, you know. How do we leave it there? How do we make that change happen?
Following on from that question, I'm thinking to this discussion about how you choose projects, is in this tension between local effectiveness and scale. How do you connect together all your dots? Because the risk is that you just have multiple dots, but not enough dots to make a big difference.
It's a very, very good question. So we look carefully at where we want to work. We want to work where other people are not necessarily working. We're small, we've got a small amount of money, and we like to make big impact in the change. Having said we don't, like we do. So, and so you're right, the danger is we're all over the place. So we are looking for groups of people who have not got the support in a place that gets very little support. So the Zambia example I was giving you, one NGO, nobody else around, they hadn't had funding for the last 5 years from anybody at all. And they were trying to do something very small. As you saw what they were doing, they weren't static. They didn't say, well, we haven't got any money, we can't do anything. I don't like people like that. Say, we haven't got any money, we can't do anything. And they were doing something. So we are trying to work. Now the idea is we want to try and plant something there to see how it works. And our idea is what we're doing in Kabompo, we're going to take down, the M8 runs straight through Kabompo all the way down to Angola. So we want to move along that road. We're now looking at another school further out, another community, which is further down the road to work. And the idea is if it works here, it might, and so local people are coming and saying, well, if you've done it here, why can't we do it here? And so the idea that I think that's an organic way of growing as opposed to Ethiopia. We were interested in working in Ethiopia because we were looking at the needs there. And I was making contacts. I made contact with a really great project in the middle of Addis Ababa, working with children with disability, which is one of my passions and interests. And I contacted one of the people there. There was a Western guy there, and he rang me up quietly and said, John, they get so much money from everybody. You don't want to be working with them. I know what you're like. You need to be working. And he introduced me to this group. He said they've got a little couple of mud, a couple of containers in a mud field. They're your kind of people. They love working in the rural areas. You'll love them. And since we've worked with them, they've done amazing things. You know, the scale of the change they've brought has been phenomenal. So it's we need to try and find the right people with the same passion as us, who can work at the scale we need to start with, but have got the vision to grow. And so it's growth within their ability to deliver and to make changes within their community that pass it on to others. So that we're trying to do that sort of mustard seed conspiracy, if you like the idea of it, going from one to another to another to another.
Do you have sufficient sort of personnel within communities
mothers in particular, the opportunity to go and expand and so to witness and learn from what their children do in school. Or is there obviously a conflict? You know, how you help the mothers to giving them allowing them free time to be able to earn some money when the children are in school.
This was a question about engaging mothers appropriately. How do you engage them, if you engage them at all, and whether it's just really we've given the opportunity for children, taking them away, that we're looking after them. You can do what you can go away and make your own money and do. It's probably a combination of the two. We do in most of our projects we have mothers groups and sometimes parents groups where we meet with them on a regular basis to talk through what's happening to them and how the project's going. So in Zambia, they'll have every month, they'll have the parents will come and have the opportunity to ask questions of the organization, usually asking for extra support, you can imagine. But once you get beyond that, they're able to tell them, this is what we've done, this is what's happening, this is what we are planning to roll out as we go forward. With some of the mothers, so in Damascus, we do a weekly meeting with the mothers because the children we're dealing with in Damascus have had extreme trauma coming out of the civil war. So there's major problems with behavioural issues and major problems with all sorts of within the community. And we need the mothers on side with us dealing with some of the issues at home to try and help them work their way through. So we do engage a lot with mothers in terms of supporting what's happening to their children. You're right, we don't do as much as like we did in Ethiopia of setting up groups for them and things like that. We don't do a lot of that. We do more meeting them, talking about the household, talking about safeguarding, talking about corporal punishment, talking about all the issues around keeping your child safe from other relatives, things like that. You know.
Thank you, John. We've learned a lot about how developing successful development really works. We'll post your talk on our website.
Thank you.
And we publish information, including what's possible from our newsletter. Let us give a vote of thanks. The coffee next door, and Rose is going for lunch and go at first. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yes.
Solve the problems and the reason that strong. So you can't have
Are you